Angelo Keely, thanks so much for joining me on the Mark Divine Show. Super stoked to have you. Nice to see you, my friend.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me, man. I'm honored.
Yeah, I got you're frozen in my picture suddenly. What's
You're
going on?
you're frozen in my picture too.
What a way to start. The very first second.
Yeah.
I love it. All right, let's try that again. Angelo Keely, nice to meet you. Angelo Keely, thanks so much. I gotta love it.
You got to start with
I've
all the
only done 400 shows,
you
right?
got to you got to start with all the outtakes too.
I know, right? Always. Sometimes we do that, which is a lot of fun. Angelo Keely, my friend, thanks. Oh, me. Angelo Keely, my friend, thanks so much for joining me on the Mark Divine Show. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks, Mark. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, no, I'm super stoked. It's been a while. I've been wanting to get you on the show, and big fan of you and your company. Also co-founded, or at least I know my friend Ben Greenfield is affiliated with your company and involved in all the cool fitness stuff you're doing. Anyway, so what are you up to today? Where are you right now?
I am at our Kion office headquarters in Boulder, Colorado, and
Right on.
yeah, I think I was just sharing
Boulder.
right before we start. I went for a run, which I typically don't do. I'm more of like a weight training, walking rucksack guy, but I had a great run this
Yeah.
morning, so I
That's
feel alert.
phenomenal. I know. You might motivate me to get back out there and try out the old legs because similar to you, I haven't run much in the last few years, but I ran like a madman for most of my life, so probably okay to give it a break. But I tell you what, though, after a long winter out there, it probably feels good to get out there and breathe in the fresh air and see
Yeah,
the sprouting grass.
Yeah, it's typically a pretty easy winter here. It's like sunny. Even if it snows, it gets sunny again. You can spend a lot of time outside. But this year it was pretty. It was cold. It was cold and it was
Was it?
grayer than normal. So I'm ready for the spring and the summer.
Yeah. Are you from Colorado, or give us a sense of your background and your life's kind of arc, your journey?
Yeah. So no, I'm not from here. I was born in a little town called Wimberley, Texas. It's outside Austin,
Okay. All right.
and I was born at home there to hippie, natural health, fitness
No
parents.
kidding.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Um, so yeah, they had a natural health food store, natural health food restaurant, and I was pretty much immersed in that. And then when I was one, we moved to Austin. My dad actually was a partner in like the early Whole Foods restaurant business,
No kidding.
and I was raised very much in this culture of health food, of whole food nutrition, but also of supplements. Never really went to a traditional doctor until I think I was like 6 or 7. I think I had to go get a physical and I had to get my birth certificate to go to first grade. So uh, I was raised, yeah, and we had a few acres, so I spent a lot of time outside and played and had a pretty sweet early
That
childhood.
sounds pretty epic.
Yeah, it was good.
That sounds epic. No, I mean, I grew up in upstate New York, so it's similarly. I was outside a lot. We had tons of land. Hung out at my friend's farm, dairy farm. So we used to milk the cows and do the hay fields. Pitching bales of hay and catching them and stacking them, and it's pretty cool.
I didn't really have
So
that. I didn't have that level of like labor.
you didn't have that
It
labor.
probably would have been good for me. I think now I realize the amount of lessons I had to learn in adolescence and young adulthood to, yeah, just to learn the value of hard work and consistency. I think as a kid, it was a lot more play and fun, which is great. I mean, I think it makes me who I am today. That's probably my top value is fun.
Yeah,
Not my top value, but
it's a good
every
one
single
though.
day I'm trying to have fun, and I think yeah, it makes me who I am. And
Well, the thing that's good about that learning to be on your own outside is that work becomes play.
mhm.
When I look back, and even when we were, that was backbreaking work. Doing the hay fields, and but we just had an absolute blast, and we got ripped. We were just in great shape. And we're just like 15, 16 years old. It's so kids, who grow up in those environments know what I'm talking about. Anytime you're outside and you're working with your hands, you just learn that this can be really, really pleasurable and fun. It's not looked at as work. I think this, we've gotten so far away from that. Society is just pushing us more and more into this kind of like mechanistic and digital world where you don't learn that. Kids don't learn that when they're young. It's unfortunate.
I think work has a potential to be really its own mindfulness practice. maybe in
Right.
today's language around it. It's like when
Mhm.
you do something with your hands and you're really involved in it and engaged in it, or with your whole body,
Yeah.
you you're going through the movements, you're breathing, you're kind of in a flow state
That's right.
that I think yeah, a lot of people miss out on now if they're just focused on a
Well,
screen
if you
or
do it enough and you have the right attitude, then it trains your mind to be able to activate the flow state, right? It doesn't happen to everybody. It really depends upon your orientation and your attitude toward the repetition of what you're doing, right? But I totally agree with you. Like, for when I started meditating when I was 21, I found it to be very easy, right? Whereas, like, when I teach meditation these days, most people think it's very, very hard to do, and they quit, or they just, they need to use an external device like an app, um, to kind of guide them or to hold their attention, which is really, it's really a preparatory practice to meditation. But anyways, I found it quite easy because I would spend so much time. I had spent already so much time outdoors doing that repetitive labor, and also, just like being alone and hiking in the Adirondack Mountains, where I was from. I don't know if you did much of that when you were younger, but when you're alone in nature and you're just moving through nature, you might have a destination, but if you begin to disengage from the goal of getting to that destination and you just start to enjoy the process and the being in nature and being with your breath and being with your thoughts, and eventually you get to a point where you develop a relationship with yourself, which is, again, very, very profound. It sounds silly, but it's very profound to develop a relationship with yourself. Like, you're going to be able to talk to yourself and to be able to curate your thoughts and emotions, be able to see yourself almost as if from a distance. So when you sit down and meditate, you're like, oh, I already have this down, right? I already have the kind of like early stages of what they're talking about down, this metacognitive capacity to witness my thoughts.
y-
Anyways, I went down a little rabbit hole there,
well,
but I
I like
don't know
that
if you
rabbit
have any
hole.
connection to that at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think that value of the process itself, how you perceive the repetitions, developing the relationship with yourself,
Right,
really is the heart of what we're talking about. And
right,
it can come through work. I think for me, it probably actually came through being just having a very unstructured early childhood and just being outside and being in nature and being kind of okay being alone, not
right.
going to a preschool, not being there with a lot of other people. But then I also relate it to, I'm a father now. I have a 10-year-old son and an 8-year-old daughter, and with my son right now, he is very interested in competitive basketball, which I
Mhm.
loved basketball as a kid, but I'd never gotten to like competitive sports in that way. And so
Right,
this week, or the last few weeks, I've been working with him a lot on like his daily shooting practice. And I think in his mind, he thinks, oh, I want to make this many baskets. And the only thing I'm focused with him on is that every single day he's shooting 100 baskets. He's counting how many he makes or he doesn't make. One day he gets 70. The next day he gets 55. And in that, when he starts to see his numbers go down, I can see inside of him there's a little voice that starts to panic or
right.
critiques him or tells him he's not good or whatever. And what I'm working with him on is like the ability of just having that relationship with himself, to calm himself in that moment, to trust that the next opportunity, that next shot is to be made anew. It doesn't
That's right.
matter what happened before, which for me, that's fundamentally what meditation is. I mean, you're sitting there in stillness and, and you're focusing on your breath or word, whatever your practice is. Thoughts are rushing in, you're releasing that thought, and you're just kind of engaging in the next moment of the
That's right.
opportunity to practice that meditation.
Yeah,
And yeah, so I think it doesn't have to be a sitting thing. It can be a work thing.
that's
It can
right.
be
That's
sports.
right.
There's so many different ways to experience it. And I do think it's unfortunate that probably so many people today are not getting a framework through something like that, whether it's
Yeah,
work or sports or yoga or meditation or something that teaches them how to have that relationship with themselves.
right. Yeah, totally. And I think there's a growing awareness of this need, and so I think, like our community and Ben's and other friends of ours are really intent on teaching people that life is a practice, and so that you can find this mindful awareness and this sense of presence and flow doing whatever it is that you're passionate about doing. Just pay attention, just pay more attention. And so we teach them kind of like tricks and tools for how to do that. I love your description, and it's such a gift for your son. Wow. Um, my father certainly wasn't helping me like that. He was beating me and chasing me out of the house. But hey, that had its own benefits as well. God bless him. But this discussion, like people wonder why. What is meditation? And what what you described is perfect because my experience is if once you can control and tame your thoughts and you can begin to disengage from them, then you begin to notice, Angelo, a discrete qualitative difference between working from memory or from expectation and being just absolutely present. And 99 point, 9999999% of humanity is rarely has that experience of just being radically present, not operating out of memory or some sort of future expectation or fantasy. But there's through meditation and discrete awareness, keep coming back to this moment of now. What's happening now? What's this experience now? You begin to experience that qualitative difference between this and thinking.
I can
And
relate.
it's so simple but hard to get there, and also hard for people to understand the profundity of that. Like what does it mean to be able to experience that qualitative difference? It's like means everything, because in that you experience the eternal nature of the human being. The time you experience that time and space are in the mind, but they're not who you are. You're not of time and space. You're something so much more. And all of that comes from just sitting and being more and more capable or skillful at operating outside of thought and using thought effectively, but not living constantly from thought.
And I think the seeming paradox for many people, which is maybe why it's hard to experience, to grasp, is
Yeah,
that in doing that, you actually become a more engaged actor in the world.
that's right.
Like it's not like it's some kind of disengaged spiritual practice where
Right.
then you're not as good of a husband or a father
Yeah. Well
or
said.
yeah, it's like you actually become. I think you can accept fundamentally. Well, it's interesting, so much of the rest of my part of my path, I ended up going to school for religious studies. That's what I went to my bachelor's
Did
degree in.
you?
So I
Okay.
was
I didn't.
yeah, so
That's
highly
cool.
informed by both Western and Eastern
Right.
religions. And
Yes.
it's really interesting. I think the essence of the Bhagavad Gita, which people are not familiar, is
Hmm.
kind of like
Hmm.
the New Testament for people who are into Krishna or
Yeah.
follow Krishna in India. And it's really the beginnings of the idea of yoga, not of yoga asana, but of
Hmm.
the philosophy of yoga, which is fundamentally that you accept your role in life
Hmm.
and you live it out as fully as you can in kind of a surrender to God in that language
Right.
of a religious context.
Hmm.
And in that surrender to the moment and being fully present now, it's not like avoiding who you are. It's not avoiding the gifts or avoiding the role you've been given in life. It's fully embracing it and releasing the expectation of who you're supposed to be right then.
That's right.
Like, so rather than me thinking for my son, oh, I really need to teach him or show him how to do this thing, or I need to make sure he grows and develops in this way, and being really focused on kind of that end goal. Instead, it's like right now, in this moment, what is this boy for whom I am the father? What does he need right now?
Right.
And that's it. And it's just
That's it.
being that right there, right then. Um, yeah. So I think it's a very embodied, present, socially positive um,
I 100%
practice at
agree.
the
And
same time it's this like deeply personal thing with yourself.
it's deeply personal, but the self expands beyond the limited egoic concept of I am this body, I am this name, I am this, this, I have these degrees and, blah, 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 these expectations. And so you release all that. This is the whole process of surrender, right? Like bhakti yoga, which you described, or Krishna talking to Arjuna, is like open your heart, right, to who you really are, and then karma yoga is then go do your destiny. Otherwise, you will create more suffering, right? To go do it, right? Fulfill your role as a warrior.
And it actually happens at the same time.
Right.
They're not
That's right.
separate. It's
They're
not
not
separate.
separate things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in that
Well done.
story, he's afraid that he's going to cause harm. He shouldn't be a warrior. It's not the right thing. No, you fully embrace your karma. You fully embrace the action in the world, and you can practice that bhakti yoga, that surrender at the same time.
Yeah, I
They're
think
not at
you're
odds with
absolutely
each
right.
other.
Karma and dharma from that tradition are hand in glove. It's the yin and the yang. They're the same. I love this conversation because I'm also passionate about this, and I love relating it to like practical life because people have a really mistaken impression of you know mental development and what the Eastern traditions have called a spiritual path, which I look at them as the same, like mental or integrative development, which is what I teach. It's been called a spiritual path. Well, what's the term spirit? It's just a word, right? What we're really talking about is developing the capacity to integrate fully and to open up to your full potential and capacity of human being, which makes, as you said very well, is like makes you more engaged because you're more present, you're more aware, your heart is open, you're more compassionate, and you bring more of yourself to the world. At the same time, you do it with a spontaneity and a light touch, a playfulness, even in the most extreme circumstances, right? That is profound, but it's just who we are naturally when we get out of our mental way, right? When
Absolutely.
we let go of attachment to the ego and to having to be the best. I love sports when I was a kid, but now I'm like, I see that's just an obsession of our egoic culture that has to be the best or believe in the best, or it's a craving, right? It's a mental delusion that is really good for us. I hate to say that, right? It's okay to strive to improve yourself, but there's no best, right, in anything really. There's just what happens now. And sometimes, as an athletic team or an individual will triumph in the now.
Hmm.
And other times they won't. But it doesn't make them any better or worse of an individual, or any team or sport or nation better or worse than others.
Yeah, I think it's if you can enjoy, if you can fully embrace and enjoy the process of competition,
Right. The
and
process, I love that.
the seeking of winning, and yet at the conclusion, when you win or you lose,
You're okay.
again you can start fresh and you just want to do it again. And that's
That's
that you love that process, that you're not you're not judging your worth or the value of your life or your time about whether you won or not. It's
that's right.
it's really that process. And in that
What
way, I
were
think it
some,
can be beautiful. It can be very helpful for people. If you get
for
attached
sure.
to the end, then yeah, it's disruptive to happiness
Well,
because you
and if
can't
you
win all the time.
That's right. You can. I mean, I've done a lot of podcasts with, champions of this and people who've conquered that, and they say the same thing. It's when they finally gave up, in the pursuit of that excellence or that insane goal, right? Like that no human has ever done this before type of goal. When they finally gave up the attachment to achieving it and just kind of surrendered to just one more step, one more, let's just do the best I can, then they often achieve where they maybe wouldn't have achieved that excellence or that goal. And they recognize that it wasn't the target of the goal all along that was important. So it's a profound lesson to get to understand. It's a journey, not the destination.
Hmm.
And life is that. What were your like challenges? Your young childhood sounds pretty idyllic and cool, but nobody's life is perfect. You wouldn't have become the person you are today without some significant kicks in the jimmy. What were those like?
So I think the frame I presented earlier of my family was accurate, and I think in
Hmm.
that family, my parents were both entrepreneurs. They were
Hmm.
both very, I would call them eccentric, loving people, and just eccentric and bold. And so as a
Right.
child, that was really kind of the only examples I had, was these very bold people, and it's probably in my genes to some degree to like have to learn all my lessons very hard on my own. And yeah, even at the dinner table, just having to explain myself, figure things out. Like it was a bunch of individuals in a family.
Mhm.
I think that context. And as I
Mhm.
got into high school and started to kind of experience adolescence, I definitely pushed away from them very hard and wanted to do everything on my own and figure out everything on my own. And that took me down the path of drugs, that took me down the path of different types of social situations.
Okay.
And by the time I'd gotten into quite a bit of trouble by the time I was 16, but when I was 16 and a half, I took too much LSD one evening,
Wow.
and I uh, inadvertently, with no intention, provoked a fight with people who were much more hardcore than me, I'd say. And they stabbed me twice in the back. They stabbed
Jeez.
me in the knee. Yeah, so where I was stabbed, I had to have emergency abdominal surgery. They assumed I was dying, and my patella tendon was severed completely. And then I was just beaten very, very badly to where I didn't wake up for days later in the hospital.
Wow.
And that experience, I think honestly, probably some form of a psychosis or psychotic break even before the trauma of the physical altercation. But
Mhm.
then that combined with the physical altercation was a very deep um, wound. It was a very
Right.
deep impression. And that happened when I was 16 and a half. I'm now 39, and it's
Mhm.
certainly been something that I've worked with ever since. It had a very big impression on me at that time though, and I think it initiated for me the beginning of it was very much my transition into adulthood, into realizing that my
Mhm.
life was fragile, that every decision that I made or decisions I didn't make would
Mhm.
impact me going forward,
Mhm. Mhm.
and that yeah, just how important my health was. Like I think I was raised in this family where health was important, but I don't think
Mhm.
I didn't understand it yet as my own person. And
Right.
so that really kickstarted for me yeah, a very deep dive into nutrition, into
Mm.
physical practices, not just like playing sports, but like things like
Mhm.
cold therapy. And I was really into like barefoot running, going back to the running thing. Like I was
Right.
like uh, heat and acupuncture and yoga and also like spiritual seeking. So
Right.
that is what I think I got emancipated when I was 17. I was like, I just got to figure this out on my own. I got emancipated when I was
Mm.
17, started supporting myself, and
By the way, how long did it take you to heal from that incident? Because that sounds pretty profound. Like you're near death.
the physical healing.
I guess physical and psychological. What was?
I mean,
Give us a little bit about
I
some of
think
that
I'm
stuff.
still healing from it
You are right.
psychologically, but
Right.
I think that yeah, I mean, physically, uh, it took me about a year.
Okay.
Um, and just with with a patella tendon being totally severed, like to be able to like run again and play sports again. I mean, it
Right.
was 6 months. I was bounced back pretty quickly, but I'd say about a year. And those years that really kickstarted for me in college. I just became very interested in meditation at 16. I mean, I became very interested in these things. I think other people, maybe other life events later in life, provoke that kind of
Right.
interest. And I was like,
Right.
I want to do meditation. I want to do yoga. I want to figure out how to heal myself. I want to do talk
Right.
therapy.
Mhm.
And so I became very engaged in these processes. And then when I went to college, I discovered like, I want to study philosophy, psychology, religious studies, like I was a seeker. And I think
That's right.
those years
The
were,
yogis say it takes 1,000 lifetimes
yeah,
to find yoga. So, it's a good, you were ready for it, right?
I guess.
Or
Yeah.
you were a yogi in your last life,
Yeah.
for sure.
So
That's
yeah, I
cool.
mean, I think that those college years really were a very profound healing process for me. And I, actually, so through that experience, I ended up living. I went to a Catholic university, and there were brothers that lived there, brothers and priests.
Hmm.
So I actually lived with them for like a year and a half.
Interesting.
And through that process, there was like a lot of like just built-in daily meditation and prayer. But I was also
Hmm.
very into yoga and my own meditation practice, etc. I think that was really fundamental. I did a lot of multi-day meditation retreats. I think just kind
Hmm.
of helped heal me. And then when I was 21, I went to India for a summer,
Hmm.
and half of that summer was doing volunteer work at an orphanage run by that Catholic group, and then the other half was to do intensive yoga study at an ashram up north. And
Wow. That's
at
cool.
the end of that yoga study, I was in a bus in the foothills of the Himalayas, and my bus collided with another bus, and the other bus went off a cliff.
Oh my goodness.
and there's no rescue efforts there. So I think this was another. I mean, the beginning of your question was what kind of has made you who you are, and then you had a
Right.
follow up question of like how long did it take you to heal from that first thing.
Right. Right.
This was like a whole new trauma that was not me being wild and crazy and provoking these very dangerous things. I mean, in
Right.
some ways it was. I was like a 21-year-old traveling in India alone, but suddenly I was involved in a situation where there were many, many. I was in a rescue effort, for a
Hmm.
day, basically trying to rescue these people off of this cliff, and many people dead and dying around me, which I had not been exposed to before.
Right.
And at the end of that day, and I went home, I went back to the ashram, and I laid down, and I just started shaking pretty violently.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I was like, "Am I making this up? Am I, like, why am I doing it? Like, what's going on?" Because I didn't know at that time things that I now know about a natural trauma response actually being
Hmm.
in animals to shake, to release
Hmm.
that from the nervous system.
Hmm.
So I'd say to some degree, between being stabbed on acid at 16
Hmm.
and then that bus accident 5 years later, I think in India, I clearly had integrated an amount of the learning and done some form of practices to where when a new type of trauma arrived that I intuitively knew or intuitively trusted or reacted in such a way that I handled it, I think in a more not mature way, but there was some intuitive sense,
Yeah.
to do
Natural.
that, the
Natural
natural
sense.
sense. So
Yeah.
clearly, I think I had reached some kind of stage then, um, but then over the next uh, 18 years, I did different forms of therapy and meditation, et cetera, and things have
Hmm.
continued to
Hmm.
emerge. And, I think really honest, just in the last, since 2020, I committed to a pretty intensive 3 times a week psychoanalysis,
Hmm.
which
Good for you.
was pretty transformative for me. I think that not even trying to go through some kind of treatment plan to like heal. It's not like a trauma
You weren't
focused.
identifying anything in particular. You're doing it for transformation.
Yeah, and I
At
think just
at
for
all
for
levels.
naming
Yeah.
what comes up, like what comes
That's
up in
right.
the moment.
Whatever
And
comes
when
up.
when you
Right.
talk enough 3 times a week about whatever's up in that moment, I think a lot of ways in which traumas from my early childhood that were connected to not traumas, but whatever led to me kind of provoking the situation when I was 16 and how that emerged in my life, there are patterns that had existed in me that I didn't even know were still there that I was
Right.
finally able to uncover and to address in these last few years. And so I think I feel much more healed now than I do probably 5 years ago, um,
That's amazing.
and integrated. And yeah, and it's an ongoing process. I mean, I'm continuing. I know I'm
Yeah.
not done. I'm not done cooking
There's
yet.
no there when it
Yeah,
comes to your own evolution. But that's what an extraordinary story. And when I look at you at 39, I see, you're a young man still, even though you may think, wow,
thank you.
I'm going to be 40 soon. I'll be 60 soon, and I feel like a young man. And and I've had a similar kind of like intensity of desire to be whole, right? To do whatever possible to uncover the karmic drives and the conditioning that is that could potentially hold me back from being a whole person and from fulfilling my calling. And it sounds like, for whatever reason you had that, whether it was the accident that opened that up to you, and there was something that opened it up to me, because I certainly wasn't this way until I started meditating
Mm.
when I was 21.
But 21, that's pretty young to engage, I think, in a contemplative
Yeah.
practice.
Yeah. And I think anyone who's listening, like the sooner you start a meditative practice, the better. And at the same time, right, there's preparatory work to do. Like, you were an athlete, and we spent a lot of time outside, and you know a lot of people just don't succeed because they don't recognize that the way these practices were taught in the other traditions, like yoga or um, in any of those Eastern traditions, was there's like a wax on, wax off period of preparation, right? Of
Hmm.
both physical, physiological, and psychological foundation building. And if you don't do that preparation, then you don't really get to skip the line. You're going to have trouble with meditation. Furthermore, if you have a serious ego development issue, which there's a ton of that going on in our Western world, like narcissism or borderline personality or something that's like really puts you on that edge. And most people, of course, are unaware of that. And if you take up meditation or you do psychedelics and you have a fantastical mystical experience, the ego will co-opt that,
Hmm.
and you take on a god complex. And we have a lot of spiritual bypassing going on as well. So it's why it's important to have these conversations, and also to understand that often a good teacher is really valuable when it comes to development, right? Because you could easily trap yourself in a spiritual bypass situation. You could easily do some harm with psychedelics, right? By not having the space, properly protected. Um, you could easily get trapped in what we kind of referenced earlier, in the sense of disattachment or detachment from reality, because you have these experience of kind of like bliss or unity, and you think that that's where you're supposed to be, like that there's an over there, not recognizing that there is no over there, it's all right here, right? So you can get trapped in that as well. And these are all pointed to by Patanjali in the Yoga Sutra, these obstacles, right? So I think, anyways, I don't know why that came up. It must need to be said, but I love
I
your
think.
story. But everyone needs to know, like, hey, everyone's journey is different, right?
Hmm.
Everyone's journey is gonna be different, but there
Hmm.
are some contraindications. There's some preparatory work, but pay attention and listen to a teacher.
I think you so succinctly name though that paradigm of maybe someone having a susceptibility towards borderline personality disorder or some kind of
Yeah,
narcissistic tendencies, and then engaging in some kind of mystical experience, and then it actually
yeah,
accentuating that and further hardening it. And
yeah.
well, I actually haven't heard someone describe it the way that you did so succinctly, and I think that is really, yeah, it's very on
Well,
point, and it makes me wonder sometimes, like, why did I say this with humility, like, what,
yeah,
why did it kind of work out for me? Like, I think it did. I think I have a
yeah.
pretty a real relationship with my wife and with my
Hmm.
children and with my family and with people I work with. Like, I don't think my idea of who I am is like totally different than who they think their idea of
Yeah.
me is, and I'm not like,
You've gotten your ego out of the way. That's the whole thing. You surrendered enough to that, right? So especially these challenges you had, right? And all the meditation and spiritual, and especially silent meditation, and spending time in an ashram. It's humility building, right? It's like there's nothing more
mhm,
humbling than just sitting in silence and looking at the crazy cacophony of your mind, and just not being scared by it, but just sitting with it.
mhm.
And then all of a sudden recognizing that that's not you.
I think that might be actually the advantage potentially of what I might call slower practices. Like, psychedelics can
Mhm.
have this amazing
Sure.
influence on people, and yet the dose of time and space and lessons and light, like, it's so much all at once. Like, when I
That's right.
had that experience at 16, it was too much.
Pretty much
I
right.
could not. It was too much for me. So then, when you asked how long did it take me, I mean, it's taken me like 20 years just to integrate it, and that's
Yeah.
through a lot of things like meditation and
Yeah.
yoga and
I
mindful
think you're right.
exercise.
I think that, like, the psychedelic movement of the 60s, a lot of people had that. They got really damaged by it because they just couldn't handle.
When I have
We
that
see
same
that.
concern for people today, like,
I do too.
that are going
Yep.
on these plant medicine
Yep.
journeys, and I don't, I'm not saying anything about them because I actually don't know. I'm not them. I've never gone on those, but I
Right.
hear people doing it and they come back and they feel so much, and I'm like, I don't know. Like, there's no free lunch. It's like same thing with like
Totally.
business. There's no way to just like make tons of money in the super easy way. I mean, maybe
No,
you're like out of luck, but like it's same thing with health. There's not like a magic secret to health. It's like
that's right.
all
Yes,
these
like
things
I've been
they
the
require
business has been a real
consistently good.
painful. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Sorry about that.
Business has been what?
It's been a painful process for me. People look. It's like it all looks good from the outside, but from the inside, it's sausage making. And I've lost millions of dollars far more times than I've earned.
Mm,
Whatever I have right now. And so you're right. There's no free lunch. There's no free lunch with development either. And I agree with you. I share your concern. This is why I've been bringing it up lately a few times with psychedelics. I am a big fan of psychedelics for for healing, especially from trauma. Like I promote it for vets, and I've done work with
mhm.
it myself. but only in the care of a very experienced healer who understands how the plant medicines work and who can do the pre preparation and holding the space during the experience, and then the post experience integration. And
Which I
so the
would
whole
assume that
you got to look at
post
it as a long process,
I
right?
was gonna
So
say, I
it's
would assume that post is pretty important, and I'm not an
very
expert in
important.
this field, but my understanding is even like those studies they did at Johns Hopkins with the cancer
Yeah.
patients, like they, it was the psilocybin facilitated experience, and then it was like 8 weeks of CBT. So there
Right.
was a
Right.
program that followed up after it to help integrate. And I don't know that CBT is the right combination with
Yeah,
some kind
it's
of
something,
psychedelic,
right?
but
Right.
something. Yeah, I mean, I think it's. I actually remember the first time I went to a Vipassana course.
Mhm.
I must have been like 18 or something. And my friend freaked out and he was like, "We got to get out of here." And we left in the middle. And I was like, I had been 5 days of no talking, no reading, no writing,
Mhm.
10 hours a day of meditation. And we like
Mhm.
left in the middle. And I was kind of just, I was like ripped open. It
Mhm.
was not good to leave in the middle. I needed
No.
to like
Right.
be through the whole thing and have them bring me through the end of the process in some form of integration. It's like, I
Right.
think just kind of blowing up your mental space is it's not enough. You
There
need to consistently build it and nurture it and support it.
there was a Harvard psychologist, I think his name was Engel, who got it, was a Buddhist meditation practitioner, and of course Buddhist psychology, yoga, it's
Mhm.
it's a psychology of the mind. So he began to bring these practices to his patients, and he worked with a lot of people with ego development issues, and he found very quickly that this was not going to work. And so one of his quotes I love, and I've always kind of reminded me that there's preparatory work to do. Back to why we're having this conversation, and he said you've got to be somebody before you can be nobody,
Mhm.
which means that the ego has to get strong enough in order to recognize itself that it's bullshit, right? So the ego has to recognize itself as a story in order for it to let itself go. If the ego thinks it's the center of the human, which happens with adults who don't have full and healthy ego development, they have some sort of trauma or something less radically unnurturing happening as a child, then the psychedelic experience or the deep mystical experience from meditation, the ego isn't strong enough to recognize itself as the story, so it takes that story on and says, "I am that."
I really relate to that. Man, you've said so many things today, Mark, that feel so succinct and like just precise. What you're saying to right now, I'm like just starting to get.
Mm,
And I feel
yeah,
like it's because like even after those other experiences in my 20s and my 30s, I was just like fighting, trying to like make myself something in the world and figure something out. And I had had these experiences and I was practicing spiritual stuff and trying to do things, but I was still just grasping all the time, just like
right.
grasping at these things. It's like literally just in like the last year, I feel like I finally settled more.
That's awesome.
And so yeah, I'm that much more hopeful for the future of what could potentially,
That's right.
and that's like from someone who's been working, so hard on it for, again, I think I'm still a very young person. I'm not even
Here's another
40.
insight, because I did the same thing. Is like we think that our own growth comes by adding things, by adding meditative practice, by adding the ability to concentrate more, by adding concepts.
Hmm.
So we study Advaita, we study, Vedic texts and Patanjali and Yoga Sutras, and you know what I mean, and all these things, whatever, or Western psychology, and I've done tons of that in EMDR, and so you go into that, and you're just out there grabbing, 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 and then you get to this point where things start to get a little bit clearer because you're now able to have the experience of reality in your everyday life through When I mean reality, it's like right what we were talking about at the beginning of this recording, like the reality of just pure radical presence beyond the concepts, beyond the thinking. And then a shift happens. So this is the shift that you're going through. The shift happens is that, holy cow, this growth doesn't happen by adding things. It happens by subtracting things. And then you enter the process of surrender. And so that's the turnaround point
Mm.
in the seeker's journey, when they stop trying to seek to add things to their life, or to think that there's something more that they don't have, and so they're going to go to this teacher or go to that retreat. I've stopped going to all retreats. I used to be a retreat junkie, just like you. I've stopped it all because I realized that wherever you go, there you are. You're not going to.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get any better, stronger, faster, smarter by going to another retreat. But what I need to do is sit
Mm.
and just begin to subtract concepts and identity structures, and subtract all the conditioning of your life to get back to your raw, natural nature.
You're right. That was another good one. That was another very, I think, precise and succinct
Yeah. You know what else
lesson
we
on the
share?
stage of development.
Yeah. What else we share, and Ben Greenfield, my buddy, also, is that, and this is missed a lot also in development, is that the body is really important to bring along with you.
Mm.
This is something that never really got taught well. It's the reason why asana exists in yoga, right? Is one of the 8 limbs, right? Because the yogis understood that the body needs to be really, really healthy and pure, saucha, right? It needs to be pristine in order for the brain to be able to experience the higher states and stages of consciousness, for evolution to occur. It happens faster if your body is strong and pure. You have that foundation.
It's a limiting factor, if not.
That's right. And that's right. It will be a limiting factor if not. And so I love that you're into fitness. I'm into fitness, but I don't do it because I just it's enjoyable to move, functionally fit. It's great, but I also do it because I want body the body brain to be healthy, so that the whole mind can flow through it, right? Or work with it effectively. And one of the things that I don't know a lot about, but I want to learn from you is, I do supplementation, and I take Kion literally every day in my smoothie, but I don't really understand what it does. I just trusted Ben. Ben says, "Take this stuff; it's great for you," and I'm like, "Okay."
Well, sometimes it's that simple and that easy, you know. That could be a good on its own. If it is indeed that good, right? Then
Yeah, I've got a
do
few of
you need
those.
to know? Um,
Well, I know. I'm
yeah,
curious though. Like, I'm curious. Like when
yeah,
I talk to my friend Daniel Schmalzenberg, I also take neurohackers stuff every day because
hmm,
it's. I think it's brilliant, but I
yeah,
don't really understand the science behind
hmm,
all their supplements. But I believe them. So,
yeah.
like, I believe you and I believe Ben. So, what's the science behind your amino acids and the other stuff that you do at Kion?
So I think at the fundamental level of amino acids, the product that you're talking about is Kion aminos, and it's essential amino acids. It's all 9 essential amino acids in a very specific formula. The underlying principle of essential amino acids is probably best understood when thinking about protein.
Hmm.
The way that we typically get essential amino acids in our diet is through protein. And the reason why this is so important is that, unlike the other two macronutrients, carbohydrates and fat, where their primary role, not only, but the primary role is energy. You consume these carbs and then you burn them. They're converted into ATP and you use them as actually energy to fuel your body, similar with fat. The role of protein is a little different. It can be used in that form, but the more primary role is to actually replace the proteins in your body. So it's
Hmm.
actually to help rebuild your body, not to fuel your body, but to rebuild your body.
This is why bodybuilders are so big on protein. They think
Because
that's
they're
like the only thing.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
because they're literally trying to increase the mass of their body, right? They're trying to
Right.
increase the
Right.
mass of their muscle, and the only way that you do that is through not you need carbohydrates, et cetera, for this, but protein is the thing that literally gets converted into new muscle tissue.
Right.
Like it is the
Yeah.
raw material of that.
Mhm.
So the reason, like, and kind of then I guess going to the heart of like, well, why, how does that work? The proteins in our body are in a constant state of what we call muscle protein turnover. And what that means is that the proteins are being broken down into their individual parts. And when a protein's broken down, it gets converted into amino acids. These 20
Okay.
little amino acids are the building blocks of the protein. And then those amino acids are used again to help rebuild new proteins.
Mhm.
And the reason why they get broken down and then rebuilt are for a myriad of reasons. It's to, in some ways, there's half lives of certain proteins, like they need to be broken down and rebuilt because to like to refreshen them in a way.
Mhm.
Sometimes though, you need additional proteins in other parts of your body. There's other priorities happening, so you'll break down one to supply another one, another place in your body. When they get broken down, you cannot reuse all of the amino acids that make them up.
Mhm.
Some of them get converted into urea, and you pee them out.
Mhm.
So you must consume protein exogenously to help replace the proteins in your body.
Hmm.
And when we talk about the proteins in our body, yeah, bodybuilders think about muscle, but we're talking all of your vital organs, your liver, your heart, your kidneys, etc. Proteins also, and the amino acids that make them up, are the precursors of your neurotransmitters. So literally the stuff that makes your brain work, your
Mhm.
emotions, your mood, which are existing within these neurotransmitters in a way,
Right.
are derivatives of this protein. So many times when people actually die of chronic illness, it's because they have organ failure, that they literally don't have enough of the raw materials anymore, and the parts of their body no longer work.
Right.
So protein plays this very, 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 very different role than carbohydrates or fat do in the
Mhm.
body. Now, when you look at protein and you're consuming different types of protein to help support the rebuilding of your organs, of your muscle, etc., there's a key element to distinguish between essential amino acids and non essential amino acids.
Mhm.
Typically, what's much more known within the realm of nutrition science is that essential amino acids are the ones that are, quote, essential because your body cannot synthesize them.
Oh,
Your
interesting.
body can actually convert essential amino acids into non essential amino acids, but your
Mhm.
body cannot convert non-essential amino acids into essential ones. So you literally must eat proteins, and when you consume different types of protein, they're made up of both essential and non-essential. For example,
Mhm.
very high quality animal proteins like whey protein or egg white or chicken, they're like 40%. The protein
Mm.
portion of it is like 40% essential. The other 60% is non-essential.
Mhm.
And that essential, you must get them, right? Because even if you only eat those, your body could make the non-essential. That doesn't mean you want to do that, but you must get those. But
Mhm.
maybe the more very interesting, very fundamental part about essential amino acids is that they are 100% responsible for muscle protein synthesis. So we've done
Mhm.
studies where we give people only essential amino acids, only non-essential amino acids, or a combination of essential and non-essential in proportions that are similar to like steak. And we've clearly seen that the essential amino acids create all of the new muscle protein synthesis. So when consuming them, that's what actually tells your body, oh, let's build new proteins, let's build new muscle.
Mhm.
The others do
Mhm.
not. The non-essential get used as raw materials to help rebuild some of that muscle and to
Mhm.
rebuild some of those proteins, but you actually don't use them all. They get converted into urea and into sugars via gluconeogenesis. But it's really the essential amino acids that kickstart that process. So
Right.
when you
Wow.
know all that, if you just say, "Well, I don't want to, I don't need, don't want to supplement. I just want to eat high quality whole foods. How should I think about this?" You
Mhm.
basically would want to look at proteins, protein sources that are very high. Well, you want to look at protein sources that are high in protein first of all, typically,
Mhm.
and that would
Makes
be
sense.
it tends to be is mostly animal proteins. They can be vegetarian, but animal
Sure.
proteins are protein. Food sources are higher in protein, like
Mhm.
grains, quinoa, et cetera. Things like that have protein in them, but there's also lots of carbs, et cetera.
Mhm.
Next, you'd want to look at that source and say, well, even in the protein that's in that food, how much of it is essential amino acids? Because that's the
Mhm.
key component that my body really needs. It's not even going to use all of the non essential ones, and all proteins are not created equal. So you're going to look for that
Mhm.
one. And then if you looked a little bit deeper, you'd look at actually, this is getting pretty nerdy and sciencey, but what's the
Mhm.
proportions of those unique essential amino acids relative to each other?
Hmm.
Because there's certain ones that your body wants more of.
Mhm.
And going back to the idea of the limiting factor of the body, like if you don't have enough physical, if your physical
Mhm.
body is not healthy enough, it may limit spiritual or mental
Right.
or other types of development. If you don't have amounts of certain amino acids, it will limit the amount that all the amino acids can work together to build new proteins.
Hmm.
So there's qualities of the protein.
Mhm.
And what I would just say right off the bat is that you can absolutely consume only whole foods and I think live a pretty good life. I
Right.
don't think people have to choose supplements. I think supplements should be supplementary.
It's an insurance policy to
It's
me.
an insurance policy. Yeah. So
Yeah.
now here's why they're especially important. I think they are very relevant probably for you.
Mhm.
Um, Essential amino acids taken in a free form supplement instead of taken as part of a whole food protein,
Mhm.
because they're concentrated and because they've already been broken down, they stimulate new protein synthesis at a much higher degree
Hmm.
than a whole food protein would.
You don't have to use energy to break down the
You don't have
protein
to use energy to break
from the
down the
whole food.
protein,
Yeah.
and because the proportions are specific, and because it's not just the energy use, like literally because it's immediately enters the blood basically
Right.
and immediately goes into the muscle, it it stimulates a greater muscle protein response.
Interesting.
On top of that, it is only the essential amino acids. So, one in a young, healthy adult, 1 gram of essential amino acids in an ideal proportion, compared to 1 gram of a whey protein powder, which is kind of like the gold standard for sports nutrition, muscle protein
Mhm.
synthesis. The essential amino acids is going to contribute 2 times the amount of muscle protein synthesis as the whole food protein,
Hmm. Interesting.
because it has 2 times the amount of essential amino acids and it's immediately available.
Mhm. Mhm.
If you give that essential amino acid 1 gram, and it's not 1 gram, you actually need to consume like 5 grams at a time, or 10 grams of protein. But if you,
Mhm.
but we'll just, for the simplicity of the 1 gram to 1 gram, if you give that to an athlete before they do resistance training, it's 3 times the muscle protein synthesis as the whey protein. And that's
Interesting.
because of how the amino acids enter the blood, enter the muscle tissue, support the training process. But here's where it gets really interesting. As you age, starting at age 30, your body's ability to break down proteins, to convert them to break them down and get the essential amino acids out of them, and then the sensitivity of your body to prioritize new protein synthesis is reduced.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
every decade at 30, it starts to get the efficiency and the effectiveness of the essential amino acids in a supplement become more and more powerful than the protein. So by age 40, it's probably 3 times as effective as a whey protein. By age 50, 4. As you get older and older, it becomes 5, up to 5, 6 times more efficient at stimulating protein synthesis than a whole food protein. So
Hmm.
if you're a 60-year-old athlete, it's
Mhm.
very relevant for you. That's because
Yeah.
it's going to be more efficiently, effectively used in your body as an athlete. It's going to support you. And as you're aging, the risk of muscle loss
Right.
due to the fact that your body cannot digest the proteins as well and you're less sensitive to stimulating new muscle protein synthesis is reduced. The value of those essential amino acids greatly increase. So,
Right.
if you're a 25-year-old and you're not really that active, you walk, you you eat minimal calories, you're not overweight, you're not really trying to be super fit, you're not really investing in trying to build more muscle yet. Yeah, I mean, you don't need to take these. The
Mhm.
more that you're interested in being an athlete and you want more out of your athletic endeavors, you want better recovery, and we can go into more of the reasons for that. And the more that you age, the more important it becomes to supplement with something like essential amino acids, or
Right.
to be extremely strategic with your whole food nutrition diet,
Yeah.
because you
Which
just
takes
aren't.
a lot of energy and time and,
Yeah,
research and blah blah blah.
yeah, and so that's why it's beneficial. So I think,
That's cool.
yeah, did that
How
answer the
how
question?
much do you need? Like for me, like say
Hmm.
I am I'm not, spending hours a day training like I used to, but an hour or so.
So
Um,
yeah, this is what I would say. It depends on how much lean muscle you want to maintain as you age and how active you want to be. One serving of Kion aminos gives you 5 grams of essential amino acids.
mm-hmm.
There is a linear impact, a linear increase of impact up to 15 grams. So if you take 3 servings at once, you will get that much more muscle protein synthesis.
Hmm.
After 15 grams, it reduces in impact. It's similar to the way protein works. If you eat a whole food
Mm-hmm.
protein, you'll get real value out of that protein up to like 40, 50 grams. After that, you still use the protein, but you use it as an energy source. It gets
Right.
used more as like a sugar to give you energy. It's not being actually used to help you build muscle. or to
Interesting.
maintain um,
Mhm.
proteins in your body, to maintain protein synthesis in your body. So, up to 3 servings at once creates a maximum protein synthesis spike in your body and supports all of the new protein production.
Mhm.
Um, in terms of how often to take it, your body, once you consume protein or once you consume essential amino acids, that's the truth of it. Once you consume essential amino acids, either as a supplement or as a whole food protein, your body enters a process of muscle protein synthesis that lasts about 3 hours. It depends
Mhm.
based off of how quickly the protein's breaking down, whether it's a free form supplement, whether it's whey or casein. Like there's a variety, but let's say it's about 3 hours. After which your body goes into basically net muscle loss. You start to break down more proteins than you rebuild. So that's why bodybuilders consume protein or some type of essential amino acid supplement like every 3 hours. That's why they would wake up in
Mm.
the middle of the night and eat chicken breast or something like that, because their goal is like, I want to build and maintain as much muscle as possible.
Right.
If you're older, like let's say someone's 80 years old, you might engage in that kind of thinking around like, hey, I'm going to take essential amino acids or I'm going to eat protein every 3 hours, not to get jacked and ripped, but to just maintain lean muscle
Interesting.
as you
Right.
age,
Mhm.
because you're in a different phase of life and it's that much harder to maintain it, etc. Um, so outside of exercise, that's what I would say is you can basically do it every 3 hours.
Mhm.
But if you're already eating a protein rich meal, it's redundant. You don't necessarily
Right.
need to do it then. Um, in and around exercise, there are if you're is your primary workout like a CrossFit workout right now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
ish.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I mean,
Yeah,
I think
yoga and a high intensity WOD every day, pretty much.
okay. Yeah. So
Mm.
there are benefits to taking essential amino acids before that type of exercise, during and after. Taking
Okay.
before will increase the effectiveness of the new muscle development.
Mhm.
Taking and will help you prevent getting as like tired during it. Taking it during will help you keep from getting as tired and it'll support the muscle development. And taking after, while it still supports the muscle development, it really supports the recovery.
Right.
So you could take, a scoop before, a scoop during, and a scoop after, or you could only choose one of those. It's all kind of dependent on, again, like what your goals are and how
Right.
important these things are to you. As I've picked up Muay Thai or kickboxing this last year, I hadn't really been doing that kind of hit type workout before. I was doing more like walking and resistance training. In doing that,
Mhm.
I take some before, I take some during, and I take some after. And
Right.
in that way, I don't get sore. Because it prevents muscle protein breakdown as well. I really don't get
Mhm.
sore. It has really enhanced the muscular gains from something
Mhm.
that's not like lifting really heavy, but I'm still training my muscles. It's really improved my endurance. And I have like an unlimited supply. So,
Yes, you do.
but yeah, I mean, for me, like the way I take it is I take some first thing in the morning because I like to be fasted in the morning, but I'm not
Right.
trying to tax my brain by not
Right.
having access to amino acids, and I'm not trying to like lose muscle in the morning or get like grumpy or something. So I take amino acids until I eat, and then take it before, during, after training, and that works
Hmm.
for me. And I'm 39. I can imagine as I got older that may shift or change depending on what my goals are.
Mhm.
So
That's
taking your
fascinating.
smoothie every day is great. I mean that
Yeah,
makes sense.
I don't think I'm using enough of it. Actually, I was only putting 1 scoop in the smoothie. I think I'll bring some down to work and start, maybe having some like after my workout and later on. And I oftentimes don't eat lunch, and so I'll go without protein, for a long period of time. Like that's what happened today. I haven't eaten
Uh-huh.
anything today, and it's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah, just having
So,
that, midday, I think.
hmm.
See how it affects your energy levels. It's not like a caffeine type energy
Right,
level, but
right,
it helps regulate your amino acids in your
right.
blood, which then become the neurotransmitters for your brain. So I think it generally helps regulate mood. It helps prevent additional muscle breakdown to supply your blood with those amino acids. And
Yeah.
most people would just feel like general improvement in wellness, energy levels,
Was-
mood.
Would someone use it in lieu of, let's say, a protein? Let's say they're like, oh my God, I'm already spending $100 a
Mhm.
month on a protein, blah, blah, blah. Would you do this in lieu of a protein to
You
save
could.
money, or is it both?
This is what I would say is I say they're two different tools.
Yeah.
And depending on your age and your goals, etc., you decide what works for you. I think people who really focus on protein nutrition, they might have beef jerky that they snack on. They might take a
Mhm.
protein powder. They might they might think about things in a certain type of way.
Mhm.
I think that essential amino acids are a very, very efficient tool that you can consider. I I haven't like given up protein
Mhm.
powder, but like I don't take it as much, but some people
Mhm.
do. I mean, I think like here could be a typical day for me. I wake up in the morning, I take essential amino acids because I don't want to have like food and like a whole protein powder type
Right. I don't have
experience.
that in the
It's
morning. Yeah.
much
Yeah.
lighter. The essential amino acid
Right.
experience is a much lighter experience. And then later I have, um, maybe later in the morning I might just have protein, like I have a
Mhm.
protein shake. Then I can have salad with meat, and then later if there was some kind of like snack that I needed, or I was like have a protein shake. Like I
Mhm.
think, or have essential amino acids. I think
Mhm.
they're lighter. You can take them as capsules, or you can take them as these fruit flavored powders that we make.
Mhm. Yeah.
And yeah, they're much more efficient. I think another thing to think about is if you're older, they're going to be much more effective than a protein. At
Right.
my age, it's kind
That's
of
good to
like,
know.
it's in the middle. It's like if I take, um, I'm not going to take protein before I go work out. Like I'm not
Mhm.
drinking me. I'm not
Mhm.
gonna be drinking protein powder before I go work out and while I'm working out. I
Right.
might do it afterwards. And so it's
Right.
like I converted to the essential amino acids. They're more efficient. They're more effective. And actually, even when you examine it from a price comparison, they basically end up being more affordable, particularly
Mhm.
as you get older, because
Right.
they're so much more efficient and effective. Like that, 10 grams of essential amino acids could be worth, 40 grams of protein
Wow.
for someone who's 50. And if they're
Mhm.
exercising, that much more.
That's such a different experience too. I mean, the amino acids dissolve, and you're just drinking little flavored water.
Yeah.
Whereas a
It
protein
feels
shake
much
is like
lighter.
a big, thick, kind of.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can eat it with a spoon.
Yeah, so I think rather than oftentimes people maybe Kion, we have a grass-fed whey protein isolate that
Mhm.
is awesome. I spent can't tell you how much time I spent taste testing every single raw
Mhm.
grass-fed whey protein isolate that we could get, and like it's the best one. It's amazing. We flavored it with only organic chocolate and vanilla. It's got,
Mhm.
and then like a little bit of like Himalayan pink salt.
Mhm.
And so it's I love that. It's not, one's not good and one's not bad. They're different.
Right. Right.
One is much lighter. It's fruit flavored. It's kind of more efficient. And I think too, if people are if people are really interested in kind of a lighter load, the caloric efficiency of the amino acids is greater.
Right.
It's just super condensed. It's like super condensed muscle protein synthesis.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for explaining
Mhm.
all that. Um, we've got to wrap this up. We've been going for a while here, but what's next for you? Like, what's the big project on your horizon?
In terms of Keon, it's I think like I shared earlier, I started from a more entrepreneurial, eccentric kind of family thing, and so
Hmm.
me learning, and that's been a lot of the ways in which I've been successful in life.
Hmm.
It hasn't
Hmm.
been through like a really traditional disciplined practice and consistency kind
Right.
of work ethic. It's been a ton of work, but it's been just like explosive work. Like I just
Hmm.
nonstop go, and more of like
Hmm.
a, yeah, just visionary, eccentric, manic type.
Right.
And as I've aged and I've become more of a father and like a better husband and have built this company, I'm learning more and more about focus, consistency, doing
Hmm.
less, like you said, removing things.
Removing.
So
Yeah.
originally, I think the idea was like, we're going to make all these products and do this and that. And then it's become really clear that it's, do less and do it better.
I love that. Yeah.
So I think,
It's a great mantra. Do less better.
do less better. It's like,
Right.
be great. Greatness comes through like this doing less and doing it better. And
Focus
so
and simplicity. Yeah.
yeah, so that's my hope is that in everything, that I can be a better husband, I can be a better father, and that in Keon, what are like little consistent tweaks we can do to like make customer service better, to make
Hmm.
communication and marketing on the website clearer and better, to make the
Hmm.
products better, to ensure that we have even better explanations of the science, that we educate, that we
Hmm.
support people, that everything gets better and greater versus some new, fresh, cool, exciting, novel thing. Um,
That's
my goal
great.
is for us to be great.
I'm going to emulate that. And that's awesome. What a great place to kind of pin this. We'll do less better, focus and simplicity, but simple is not easy, as you know. So it takes a lot of discipline. It's been a great conversation. Really fantastic. Thank you very much, Angelo. I really
Thank you,
appreciate you.
Mark.
Yeah. We'll look
Thanks for
forward
the
to seeing you
lessons you
again.
shared with me today.
Hoo-yah.